Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm speaking on behalf of FactBucks, the Parent Carer Forum for Buckinghamshire. Our role is representing the lived experience of parent carers and work in co-production with services, not to deliver policy, but to help families understand it and to feed views back into the system. Today's session focuses on the government's proposed SEN reforms, what they say, what they don't say, and crucially, where parent carers can influence what happens next. We created a Padlet to safely capture views and concerns. You can post anonymously. Please focus on systems and experiences rather than naming individuals or schools. Everything Family shares helps shape Buckinghamshire's local SEN reform plan and ensures parent and carer voices are central to feedback and co-production. This session brings together official documents from the Department of Education alongside additional explanation and context. We'll start by briefly outlining the key documents, then look at the vision behind the reforms. We'll spend some time later on what we can actually be influencing through the consultation and how you can share your views safely and meaningfully. There will be time for a reflection rather than debate. We're gathering experiences, not trying to reach consensus today. The main policy document is the school's white paper, Every Child Achieving and Thriving. This sets out the government's overall direction for education reform, including SEND, alongside workforce plans such as the Additional Teachers Delivery Plan. It's important to note that the white paper itself does not contain consultation questions. It outlines the government's vision and its intent, which is useful context, but not something we are being directly asked to shape at this stage. Alongside the white paper is the SEND-specific consultation, putting children and young people first. This is where the opportunity to influence sits. There are multiple formats available, including easy read and children and young people's versions, which is important for accessibility. The consultation contains 39 questions. Not everything in the document is open to change. Some proposals are fixed and others are genuinely consultative. Several additional documents sit alongside the consultation. These include the Equalities Impact Assessment and Children's Right Impact Assessment, which matter because they show how the government thinks reform affects different groups. There are also background data and early information about specialist provision packages. These documents help us understand assumptions being made and where parent-carer experiences may challenge them. The government has also produced short guidance sheets aimed at different audiences: parents, early years settings, mainstream schools, special schools, and post-16 providers. These are designed to simplify complex reform proposals. While helpful, they are summaries, not guarantees. FactBucks encourages families to read these alongside the consultation itself and to reflect on whether what's written matches lived experience. These slides come directly from the Department of Education and set the scene for the layered model of support. As we go through these, we reflect and encourage you to think about whether this reflects what currently happens in reality and where gaps still exist for families. Keep in mind that language like earlier support and consistency, they can mean different things in practice. White paper, Every Child Achieving and Thriving, along with its supporting materials, doesn't contain specific consultation questions. Instead, it provides the overarching strategy. Crucially, the SEND reform, Putting Children and Young People First document, is the open consultation, which features 39 questions on key aspects of the proposed reforms. It's available in various formats, including an easy read version and one specifically for children and young people. as well as a British Sign Language video, large print and braille. It's important to note that while this is an open consultation, the government isn't seeking feedback on all proposed changes. This means you can influence certain aspects, but not every detail is up for debate. The questions are embedded throughout the document, with a complete list in Appendix C, Part B. You can respond online, by email, or by post. They understand the one-size-fits-all system is not working for children, so they're moving towards choosing inclusion to meet children's needs. And in order for children to receive timely and appropriate support in the future, they are investing heavily in the system, an additional 4 billion in the reforms between 2026-27 to 2028 and 29. There are 3 layers of support to deliver better outcomes for all children. The new offer, universal, with layered of support, targeted, targeted plus, and specialist. The universal offer is intended to apply to all children, including those with SEND, without diagnosis or formal plans. The emphasis here is on inclusive leadership, high-quality teaching, early intervention, and strong relationships with families. From a parent-carer perspective, the key question is, how consistently is this applied across settings, and how will families know what they can expect? There is significant investment promised, but outcomes will depend on implementation at local level. The National Inclusion Standards aim to create a shared understanding of evidence-based inclusion across the country. This could reduce postcode variation, which is something parent carers repeatedly raise with FactBucks. However, standards alone don't enforce practice. A key issue for families is how these standards will be monitored and whether they translate into real changes in classrooms. This slide reinforces the reasonable adjustments do not require a diagnosis. For many families, this reflects what the law already says, but doesn't always happen in practice. The proposed guidance could be helpful if it is practical, enforceable, and understood by staff. Parent carers may want to consider whether current barriers are due to lack of guidance or a lack of accountability. Also, there's the reflection that children's needs are not fixed. They may change over time, and many will face barriers to learning at different stages of their lives. A major proposal is universal SEND and inclusion training for all staff from September 2026. The emphasis shifts inclusion away from just being the SENCO's responsibility. From a family's perspective, this raises questions about consistency, quality, and workload, and whether training leads to meaningful change rather than box ticking. These are areas where consultation feedback is particularly valuable. These proposals aim to broaden pathways and adapt curriculum delivery, including post-16 routes and vocational options. Disability inclusion in the curriculum is highlighted, which may support wider understanding and acceptance. Families may want to reflect on whether curriculum flexibility currently meets their child's needs and what barriers remain in practice. This slide reinforces the importance of transitions across phases. Transitions are a common area of difficulty raised by parent carers. As you look at this, consider what currently works well and what breaks down, especially between early years and primary, primary to secondary, and post 16. Individual support plans are central to the new Targeted and Targeted Plus layers of support. They're designed to be consistent, portable, and co-produced with parent carers. A key concern for families may be how individual support plans interact with educational healthcare plans and whether they risk becoming a replacement rather than a supplement. The fact that Ofsted will raise individual support plans raises questions about how parent voices will be reflected. Targeted support sits within mainstream settings and is intended to prevent escalation of need. Individual support plans are required here with regular reviews involving parents. Families may want to consider how often reviews happen now, how meaningful they feel, and whether support is genuinely evidence-based. Targeted Plus introduces access to additional specialist input while remaining within mainstream education where possible. This includes use of inclusion bases and short-term specialist placements. Parent carers may want to reflect on whether this feels like added support or whether there's a risk of delayed access to statutory provision. Expert at Hand is intended to address delays in accessing special advice. Support is planned collaboratively and aims to upskill staff, not just to assess children. Families may want to consider how accessible professional advice currently is and whether early access would change outcomes. There is a new publication out on the funding of this Expert at Hand and is included in our Padlet. This is a significant investment with funding split between mainstream access and specialist outreach. The intention is to reduce escalation and reliance on statutory assessment. Parent carers may wish to consider safeguards, how quality will be assured, and how children whose needs still require an educational healthcare plan will be identified promptly. There is a substantial capital investment planned for inclusion bases. They are intended to support children with mainstream schools while offering specialist environments. Families may want to reflect on whether this would have helped their child or whether access to specialist schools remains essential. This slide outlines how existing SEN units and internal alternative provision will be reframed as inclusion basis. The language shift is important, but practice will matter more. Parent carers may wish to consider how decisions about placement will be made and how inclusion bases interact with educational care plan rights. Specialist support remains for children the most complex needs. The reforms aims to clarify pathways, but concerns remain about these thresholds, access and delays. Many parent carers will want reassurance that specialist provision is not being reduced in favour of mainstream at all costs. Slides 26 to 28. These slides explore how specialist provision packages interact with educational healthcare plans. A key proposal is separating guaranteed provision from day-to-day delivery. Parent carers may wish to reflect on whether this strengthens or weakens protections and what accountability looks like. What does accountability look like, and how will it be monitored across the system, ensuring children and young people get the support they need? Individual support plan will be created and held within this local setting, and the educational healthcare plans will be created and held by the local authority. Specialist provision packages are grouped by curriculum adaptation, delivery, and access. The intention is greater clarity and consistency. Families with children with low incidence or highly complex needs may want to consider whether these packages feel sufficiently flexible and personalised. Packages based around the provision need to enable access to the curriculum. This visual summarises the package approach. Think about whether your child needs fit neatly into categories, or whether complexity and overlap risk being oversimplified. The following slides summarise headline investment figures. While investment is significant, funding alone does not guarantee improved experiences. Parent carers may want to consider whether funding addresses root causes or symptoms. Each of these slides outlines funding tied to specific reform areas and includes consultation questions. Fact Bucks encourages families to consider whether funding prioritises align with lived experience, particularly around early support, workforce capacity, and local authority delivery. Regarding the national training, there are 3 consultation questions being asked in this section. With regard to experts at hand, there is 1 consultation question, question 20, which is asked in this section. And with the Inclusive Mainstream Fund, there are 2 questions, question 30 and 31, that are asked within this section. And the local authority send services, there are 4 consultation questions, questions 34 to 37. High needs capital investment have 2 questions. And the high needs stability grant, which although is not explicitly referenced within the consultation documents, the government will resolve 90% of local authorities' dedicated schools grant high needs deficits which have accrued over the past year, which is projected locally about £40 million. We've created a Padlet to safely capture views and concerns. You can post anonymously. Please focus on systems and experiences rather than naming individuals or schools. Everything shared helps shape FactBuck's feedback and co-production work. These slides break down where consultation questions exist and where they don't. This is about shaping how reforms are delivered, not whether they happen. Your experiences remain critical evidence even where proposals appear fixed. Now let's turn to the consultation itself. As mentioned, there are 39 questions, but not every proposed change is open for influence. For example, sections like Our Vision and Case for Change have no questions. However, questions like question 1 ask, how can we make sure children, young people and their families have a genuine say in these decisions? And question 2 asks, how can we make sure that high quality evidence and best practice inform decisions about SEND? In part 1, covering putting children and young people first, there are questions about the different layers of support. Question 3 for the universal offer. Question 4 for targeted support. Question 5 for targeted plus. Question 6 for specialist support. And question 7 and 8 address the aspects of the SEND Code of practice, including mental health and well-being and the refreshed areas of development. Further questions in Part 1 delve into early years support, such as question 9 on joint working between early year providers and Best Start family hubs, and question 10 on improving the 2-year-old progress check. Question 11 focuses on the top 3 priority areas for national inclusion standards, while question 12, 13 and 14 address national training, teacher workload and the evolution of the SENCO role respectively. Part 2 of the consultation, New Targeted and Targeted Plus Support that is written into law, asks about individual support plans. For instance, question 15 asks, what would provide assurance for families that an individual support plan is high quality and contains the essential information? There are no questions, however, on effective curriculum delivery and adaptations, or many of the transitions between early years schools and colleges. Question 17, however, specifically addresses transitions into adulthood. Question 18 and 19 relate to inclusion bases, asking how to ensure every area can meet the full range of needs and how these bases can help children succeed in mainstream settings. Question 20 then focuses on the experts at hand offer, asking about arrangements needed between local area partners for effective delivery. These slides highlight specific consultation questions. You do not need to answer everything. Focus on areas most relevant to your child and your experience. Depth and clarity matter more than volume. How can we ensure that children are best supported in the various layers of support? Is there any differences in what we need to ensure children and young people are best supported at each layer? What are the most important issues for national training to cover to help support children and young people with SEND? And what practical actions can help teachers, educators and leaders manage workload whilst implementing these changes? How should the Special Education Needs Coordinator (SENCO) role evolve to better meet the needs of children and young people with SEND? The document also covers how specialist provision packages will interact with the educational healthcare plans. What needs to be in place so that children and young people with low incidence, high complex needs can always access the right specialist placement. There's a question on what's needed to make proposals work effectively where educational healthcare plans guarantee educational provision set out in a specialist provision package and day-to-day provision is captured in individual support plans. Another question asks about creating a more direct route to specialist provision packages and educational care plans assessments for children under 5 with complex needs. What would you expect to be considered as part of the needs assessment? For example, evidence and expert or professional input. Local SEN reform plans are critical to how reforms will be implemented locally. Approval of these plans is linked to funding and deficit relief. Parent-carer forums are expected to be involved meaningfully, not tokenistically. FactBucks' role is to support co-production and challenge where engagement falls short. Finally, let's consider the local SEN reform plan. Local area partnerships convened by local authorities have been commissioned to develop these plans. These plans outline how they'll pivot their systems towards early intervention and greater inclusion ahead of legislative change, crucially securing the Secretary of State's for Education's approval of their local SEN reform plan is a prerequisite for local authorities to receive the High Needs Stability Grant, which addresses their significant dedicated schools grant deficits. The Department of Education's vision for SEN reform, as detailed in Every Child Achieving and Thriving and the SEN reform, Putting Children and Young People First consultation, represents a significant investment and a comprehensive strategy to create a more inclusive and effective system for children and young people. By focusing on universal provision, targeted support and specialist interventions, alongside substantial financial backing and a clear consultation process, the government aims to ensure every child has the opportunity to achieve and thrive. If you found this overview helpful, consider sharing it with someone else who might benefit from understanding these important reforms. Good local SEN reform plan needs a clear and realistic vision for the system in 3 years, a credible strategy for how to achieve it, and a detailed 1-year delivery plan with testable work streams, a workable system for monitoring and evaluation, and a strong governance for clear accountability. What's in the local SEN reform plan? The vision, the strategy, the Year 1 delivery plan, which has to be approved by the Department of Education with regular monitoring and evaluation, and the governance to ensure that there is accountability. Year 1 focuses on laying essential foundations, including early implementation steps for the experts at handover, strengthened governance, and a robust monitoring system. It's about establishing the building blocks and demonstrating a credible trajectory for the next 3 years. As we said before, we've created a Padlet to safely capture views and concerns if you don't want to complete the form on the Department of Education website. You can post anonymously. Please focus on systems and experiences rather than naming individuals or schools. Thank you for your time, honesty, and contributions. FactBox will continue to gather and amplify parent-carer voices as reforms progress. Your lived experience is not anecdotal, it is evidence. Please continue to engage in ways that feel manageable for you. Everything shared directly informs Buckinghamshire's local SEND reform plan and supports meaningful co-production with families and partners. Thank you.